everyone, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. I just thought it would be kind of fun to talk a little bit about the grains I like to use. Now, I noticed somebody asked about gluten-free. We are not gluten-free. We have no need to be gluten-free. We cut back on gluten for a short period of time when we were weaning ourselves off the thyroid. We were just trying to do everything we could to make sure that that whole process went smoothly, but that was the only reason why. Just in case the gluten could have been a problem why we had low functioning thyroid and had to be on the medication. But now we don't worry about it, and it's been 14 years since we went off. So I do have some gluten-free recipes. I have a gluten-free flour blend that I was making for a while. Even though I did pretty good on creating the gluten-free pie crust, I was really, really happy with how it turned out. It's still just in the same, but I was happy with how it turned out. It was close. It was very, very close. It was still flaky and light. For a low gluten option, at least, or a gluten that is usually more tolerable, going with ancient grains is a really good idea. And that is some of the ones I recommend stocking up on. And I did try growing some einkorn wheat that actually did pretty good. However, I haven't done anything with it. I've just been saving it for seed. I have heard that grinding the einkorn, I don't know if the others like the emmer and some of those other ones can be a little sticky. I think when I was trying einkorn a few years ago, I was mixing it in with my hard wheat grains. I have two main grains I store for breads, generally speaking. You know, whether it be yeast breads, especially when I'm making the cracker bread. I call it cracker bread. They're crackers. You can call it whatever you want. And I use only the whole grain flour that I grind up myself, plus added seeds like chia, flax, black seed. Sometimes I'll throw in poppy, and I soak them in the warm water before I start making the crackers. I like to soak them for at least 10, 15 minutes. But that I do use just nothing but, I don't use any white flour in there. So the two grains are the barley, which is a softer grain. The look and texture of it when you go to grind it is very, very similar to a soft wheat grain. So if you're new to grains like this, you may not realize that some grains are much harder. That's why they're given the name soft or hard. But even some of them, like barley, is not given that name soft, but it is a soft grain. You can tell just by looking at it, it's kind of fatter. Your harder grains tend to be kind of skinnier looking. The thing I don't like about the soft grains, they are more delicate and they're great for doing more delicate things like pastries and whatnot. But when you go to grind them, they take a very long time to go through the grinder. Doesn't matter if you're doing it with electric or you're doing it by hand, they take a long time. They're easy to grind because they're soft. So if you're doing it by hand, they're easier to grind. It's easier to turn that wheel than with the hard grains. But for some reason, it takes them so darn long to go through the mill. So I do a blend of the hard white wheat. So it's a 50-50 blend. And when you mix the two together, you get a better all-purpose flour because you're getting that softer grain that's great for your more delicate things, where the harder grains do help hold things together better and assist the softer grains when going through the mill. And it just goes through nice and smooth. That's why I like to do the blend. One of the reasons I brought this topic up this time, not like I've never talked about it before, but usually I'm doing a general video on grains, but I just want to talk specifically about the things I use for bread. Well, somebody had asked me, well, I know I have to store hard red wheat. No, you don't. Here's the problem when you got a lot of prepping channels out there that are only focused on just prepping. And this is what you have to do. You have to have oxygen absorbers. Wrong. And I fell for a lot of this too. You have to have the hard red wheat because it stores the longest. Well, there's something called hard white wheat that stores just as long. It's a great wheat to store. And if you're one who, like me, never liked the flavor of wheat breads especially when I was younger, I mean, I wanted to like it because I knew it was healthier than plain white bread, but I never liked the flavor until I got into starting to put up grains and things like that and found out there's more than just one kind of wheat. And I realized that the red wheat is where you get that more bitter flavor that makes up most of the wheat breads that you buy. If you like that, great, store that. That's what you should store. But I have never cared for that flavor. I mean, I can tolerate it. And as an adult, I've learned to like it okay, but it's just not the same, especially when you're making certain things where you really don't want that particular flavor in there. Where your hard white wheat, you get all the same benefits of having that hard grain and long storage life without that flavor. It's very mild, maybe just a tad sweeter, if you could say that. I really like the flavor. Um, because of that, it blends well with anything and everything when it comes to making a flour, as does the barley. The other reason I like to mix it with the barley is barley is going to have its own benefits that are going to be different than your wheat. Now, again, for those who have issues with gluten, I'll just repeat this. I do recommend looking into your ancient grains that are wheat grains, but some of the original grains before the gluten became what it is. And a lot of times people can make that change and do just fine on those. But they are far, far, far more expensive. Now, I only buy organic, non-GMO grains, and I get all mine from Azure Standard. Spelt is another one that is a good grain to store. However, it is also a softer grain, kind of like barley, maybe not as soft as barley or soft white wheat. Soft white wheat is great too. I used to store that as well. But I replaced the soft white wheat with the barley so I could get the benefits of both wheat and barley in there too. Those are my favorites, but I also do store the organic, unbleached white flour that I get from Azure Standard. I used to be able to get, when we would go into Costco, I would get their organic, unbleached white flour. I believe they still carry it. It's a good flour. It's just we almost never get into the Costco store because it's 75 miles away. So anything I get from Costco, typically I have ordered online, and the flour I don't think is available. And even if it is now, I just get it from Azure Standard. I've been very pleased with it. And the reason I like the white flour, again, unbleached being very important, and organic also being very important to me, is when I'm making yeast breads and biscuits, especially those two, I really like to use a blend of my whole grain flour and the white flour to make it more fluffy. Because the problem with your whole grains is, anyone who's worked with breads at all know that it tends to make your breads and such heavier. So they might not get the same kind of puffiness or rise as they would if you lighten it up with the flour. But if it came right down to it and I just had to rely on whole grains, then yeah, I would still do that. I would still make my yeast breads, biscuits, and all that. We just prefer having that white flour blend in there. Then the other flour I now store is the organic semolina flour, solely for pasta making. That's the only reason I'm storing that now. So I bought a 25-pound bag of it from Azure, and it was the best price I've seen on an organic semolina flour in forever, probably ever. And it's organic, non-GMO, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, I was going to recommend rye too. I had some rye stored for way too long and forgot about it, and I don't remember if I froze it first. I've been trying to get in the habit when I have freezer space to freeze my grains when I get them in for about a week, if they're depending on the size of the bag, and then take them out, air them out, let them get, make sure there's no moisture in there before I pack them into the buckets. But anyway, I was thinking, oh, I need to pull that rye out and grind it up and make some rye bread. Because I kept forgetting about it, and it didn't have weevils in it, but it had something in there. It was some kind of little teeny tiny bug, smaller than weevils. I don't know what they were. I've never seen them before. They were really small. So I ended up freezing those to kill all the bugs, whatever was in there, so they wouldn't spread. And then, no, I didn't use them for bread. I ended up adding them to the chicken scratch until I worked through all of them, because chickens don't care. They like bugs. so, but I just mostly wanted to make sure anything in there was dead before I put the bag along with the other chicken grains, because those are all stored in the house. I was storing them out in the chicken coop, but not only did I not have enough space for all that I started storing, but I was more concerned about issues out there, and I wanted them in the house where they'd be safer from rats, mice, and bugs. So yeah, I didn't want whatever that was infecting all the other stuff and then spreading through the house. Even though my other grains are stored in very, very different places, the ones that are stored for us. So it would take a lot of traveling for them to get to our other grains. But yeah, anyway, so rye, if you like it. There's a lot of other ancient grains that are a wheat type grain. I think I keep wanting to say kamut. Is that right? Yeah, I think it is Kamut. I've never tried that one, and there's several more. I've only tried emmer and einkorn when it comes to those. And then you have your other types of seeds like, amaranth and buckwheat. I love buckwheat. There's another good one to store. I do recommend, though, if you're going to buy buckwheat, get whole buckwheat. You can grind up the buckwheat with the holes in it. I one time ordered buckwheat because it is a gluten-free. And of all the gluten-free flours, that's probably my favorite. I've always loved the flavor of buckwheat. But I didn't realize it had holes, hard holes. They will grind up okay, but then you'll end up with all these black flakes in your flour, and it will make the things that you make look kind of gray. I just didn't like the way it ended up looking. So now I know to look for hulled buckwheat. And I was going to say also, make sure that if you're trying any of these grains for the first time, I would say buy a small amount. Try it first. See if it's a dietary issue. See if it's going to work for you first. But also see if you like the flavor of it, or if it's going to work well in the different types of breads and, pastas and cookies, crackers and whatnot that you make before you invest in getting a bunch of it. Because like I said, a lot of people were telling me when I was, talking about growing that einkorn just to see if I could, because it is a really expensive grain. People were asking me, are telling me that, they just found it to be very sticky and harder to work with. So I don't know from experience, again, because other than that one, the whole grains I'd bought a long time ago, and mixed it in with the other grains. So it could be because I was mixing it in with the hard white wheat that I didn't have any issues with it. Because again, the hard white wheat just kind of helps hold everything together, helps it go cleanly through the grain mill, etc. I was going to add, because typically they do say that your hard berries store longer and better than soft berries, but honestly, I haven't seen any issue with the soft ones, other than the ones that ended up getting weevils. I really haven't had any issues with the long-term storage. And this is me not using oxygen absorbers or anything like that. Though I have to admit, I have some wheat grains I keep forgetting that I have stored in Patrick's shop, because I stopped using that for food storage a long time ago. But I still have some, they're big buckets. not like your 5-gallon buckets, not your 7-gallon buckets. These are much bigger. They're like twice the size, probably 10-gallon buckets that have wheat grains stored in them. And that was back when I was still using, well, I was trying out the lame oxygen absorbers and storing them in Mylar too, inside the buckets. And I keep forgetting about it. I told Patrick the other day, I need to pull those grains out and check them and see if they're still good. See if maybe rats might have chewed through the bucket and the Mylar, or see if they're, still good. I would imagine as long as everything stayed sealed, they should still be good. I highly doubt there'd be a problem. I mean, they've probably been out there for 12 years or more. Only use Mylar if it's something that's going into long-term storage. But the stuff that I keep in my pantry, and I'll have big buckets of grains and I'll just rotate through those directly. And I just keep them in the bags they came in. It's just like the flour. What I do, because this is the easiest way for me, because again, I'm pretty sure they're 10-gallon buckets. Instead of buying the 50-pound bag of flour, which might save me a little bit more, I buy the 25-pound bags of flour. And then I can put 2 of those bags into a bucket at a time. And I stack them in a certain way so that I make sure that they're kind of in a wedge shape, so that the newest one goes in first, because this means I got to pull the other one out. The newest bag goes in first with the wide part of the wedge down, so the top of the bag comes up, and then the oldest one gets inverted and goes on top, and so that they're like 2 wedges, like this, right? And then I have an open bag that I keep out, and then that's what I'm working through. And then when I get to the bottom of that, I'll order another bag and then switch everything out. Here's the deal with the freezing of the grains and why I started doing it was because if I didn't have weevils, I had been storing grains for years, never had weevils. And then all of a sudden, bam, I had weevils. And I'm like, okay. So I learned about how the whole thing works. And I think you're going to find this more commonly in organically grown grains that, haven't been sprayed with a bunch of garbage, right? Meaning they're going to be more susceptible to getting bugs. And weevils, what they do is they lay their eggs inside of the grains themselves, and you won't know they're there. So you could get a bag of grains and it can look clean. You don't see any weevils in there, but all it takes is, I don't know if it's just, I assume maybe a couple of weevils, but all it takes is for a couple of the grains to have weevil eggs in there, and they start hatching out and they eat their way out of the grain, and then they start making babies, and then they're planting more eggs, and then the whole thing ends up just full of weevils. So freezing your grains will kill any possible weevil larvae or eggs that are inside the grain, because you won't know that. You won't know for certain. And it is a good idea. But that's another good reason too why it might be better for some people to get smaller bags to stock up on. I mean, typically not always, but typically you can get a better price per pound buying 50 pounds over 25 pounds. But even if you are paying more for the 25-pound bag, if it's going to help add a little bit of insurance, or just like me with the flour, it makes that whole switcheroo thing so much easier. Sometimes it's worth paying that extra cent or 2 per pound. So I did talk a little bit about storage. I do recommend we don't do this, but it is a really great idea, especially if you have rats or mice, wherever you're storing could be a problem. Galvanized garbage cans. Get clean galvanized garbage cans. And then whether or not you use Mylar is going to be up to you. Mylar can help make it a little more airtight than storing it in the original paper bags. Like all the grains I get now only come in paper bags, which I prefer over the plastic. And I like to keep them in the paper bags. But you could put that whole bag like that inside Mylar so it's not actually touching your grains, and then seal that up. The one thing Mylar is going to do is going to help prevent the scent of the grains from getting to the rodents that will want to chew through your plastic buckets if you're storing them in plastic, and then keep them just more airtight. And then I just push all the as much air as I can out and then seal it up and don't use oxygen absorbers. But yeah, using a galvanized garbage can over plastic buckets can be a really great way to do that. So, and whether or not you want to use oxygen absorbers, that's up to you. I just found through the time that I used them that they were just a complete waste of money and absolutely not necessary. And I've come to believe they were just more of a gimmick because, and people, somebody's always wanting to convince you, especially all those AI generated videos are always talking about, oh, with oxygen absorbers and Mylar bags, and like that's the only way to store stuff. Do you remember how Joseph stored all the grains in Egypt? They didn't have Mylar and oxygen. And they had oxygen. I hope they had oxygen. They didn't have oxygen absorbers, but they stored those for 7 years. Well, no, it would have been longer because they started storing it through the first 7 years, and then it lasted them through the 7 years of famine. So some of that could have been stored up for 14 years without all that fancy schmancy stuff. Okay, just a silo or two or 100, I don't know.